Is the Camino hard? That's the question for this week. Look, I know it's something that first-time pilgrims worry about, and my simple answer is no, it doesn't need to be. So let's talk about some of the things that can make it hard and how to avoid those. Coming right up. So many people embarking on their first Camino, and I know I worried about this. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, how hard is this? This sounds impossibly hard. You know, people walking enormous distances and carrying packs and, you know, in a foreign country and, oh, I don't know if I can do this. All I would say is don't overthink it. Let's just talk about some of the things that might be in the back of your mind and causing you to worry that maybe you're not up to it, and I'll give you some solutions. So stay till the end and I'll give you a little bit of a checklist. And what I say in a lot of these videos is, hey, if I can do it, I'm not a particularly young chicken, spring chicken, and I'm not very fit. If I can do it, you can. So let's walk through some of the common concerns that you might have in the back of your mind about, you know, how hard is this? So I think number one has probably got to be fitness. Now, if you're one of those super fit pilgrims that I met on my last Camino, you know, you can probably skip this next minute or so. A lot of people who walk the Camino, who particularly walk the very long ones, are quite experienced hikers. They probably walked Caminos before, and they seem quite fit. Well, they do to me. If you're a first-time pilgrim, though, do not worry about it. It's a little bit like going to the beach. You know, when I first came to Australia, I live in Australia. When I first came to Australia, I was a bit nervous about going to the beach because I don't have a six-pack and you know, I'm not one of those sort of beach bodies. And I got down to the beach and it was full of whales. So I need not have worried. The Camino is a bit like that, not quite full of whales, but full of people who are not experienced hikers. So don't worry about that. There's lots of average people like you and me, not particularly fit, never walked a long distance before doing it. So fitness can be a worry. What I would say is, you know, just be sensible about the distance and so on. And when I come to the sort of checklist at the end, I'll give you a few tips on that. So start some gentle exercise would be my tip. And if, like me, you are significantly overweight, do try to lose some weight. It's an enormous help. So fitness can be a worry, but look, if you can walk 5 to 8 Ks, 5 miles, you know, without collapsing in a heap, you're at a good start point. You've got something to build on and you can improve your fitness before you go on Camino. Probably another concern at the back of your mind, I think I had this one, is language. So depending on which Camino you're walking, you might be walking in France or Spain or Portugal. I mean, I'll assume most people are going to be walking in Spain. That's the most popular area. How much do you need to be able to speak Spanish? I walked my first Camino with probably, you know, 20 basic words. You know, I could say my name and things like that, and I could order a meal, simple meal, and that was about it. Did I manage? Yeah, of course. You know, these days we've got Google Translate and all sorts of things. But what I would say, and I was going to say, you know, for those who speak fluent Spanish, turn off. There are some quite good Spanish speakers amongst the pilgrims. I've been surprised over the years, but most of us don't speak much. So what I would say is try to learn a bit. Like visiting any foreign country, if you can speak a little bit of the language, not only is it going to be deemed as much more polite, you're making an effort, but you're going to enjoy the whole thing a lot more. Don't stress over it, okay? I mean, I've never had formal lessons. I had a tutor for about 6 hours. I've done some online training. Actually today, I mustn't forget, at 5 o'clock, I'm actually starting some formal Spanish lessons. So I thought it's about time I actually tried to improve. So, you know, I've kind of got to the level over the years where I can order accommodation, order food. I can even, you know, book accommodation over the phone. I can cope with the things that I have to be able to do on a remote Camino, but not much more than that. So I want to try and get beyond that. Do you need to be at that level to walk your first Camino? No, don't stress over it. But, you know, every little bit that you can learn helps. So, you know, basic stuff, please, thank you, where is, you know, all of that. If you're starting from zero, numbers, your name, helps when you're checking into places, things like that. So don't stress about it. You can get by without. Is your Camino going to be enhanced by upping your level of Spanish, Portuguese, French, whatever? Yes, of course. And that's why I always try to improve every Camino that I go on. So language, don't let it be a worry. Packing, oh yes. I was on Eva's forum this week, and somebody was it on Eva's forum? No, it might have been on Facebook, where somebody was packing and saying, you know, I'm carrying I think it was a 55-litre pack, and it weighs 12 kilos, you know, I'd like to get it smaller. My comment was something like, Pat has a 24-litre kilo and it weighs, a 24-litre pack and it weighs 5 kilos. One of the things that we all get wrong, I think, on our first Camino is that we carry too much stuff. And you're going to be worried about, how am I going to fit everything into my pack? All of the stuff that I must take, all of the stuff that I need. Let me tell you, most of the stuff that you think you need, you probably don't. I carried way too much stuff on my first Camino. I probably dumped 4 or 5 kilos worth. And I should add, if you look at the description below this video, I've put in there, I think there's 6 videos for first-time pilgrims, and there's one there on packing and, you know, planning and all that sort of stuff. So you've got some more meat to go and look at there. But everybody, I think, almost without exception, plans to carry too much stuff. And what happens is they end up ditching stuff along the way and chucking it away and leaving it in charity bins and so on. So what's a good rule of thumb? Look, unless you have particular needs, unless you're carrying a CPAP machine or, you know, 3 kilos of medicines or something, I'd say a good number to aim for. Oh, let's pick a number here and get you worried. 6 kilos, not counting food and water. So that's your pack with all your stuff in it. If you can get 6 to 7 kilos, I think you're doing okay for a first timer. You'll cut it down after that, because you'll realise that you don't need even some of the stuff that you're taking along. So, you know, tips with that is to always lay out all your stuff on a table or something, go through it all. You know, you really only need one of something and you know, 2 sets of clothing if you like. I won't try and do my whole packing video, but, you know, there's an enormous amount of stuff that you think you need that you don't. I think my last Camino, which was kind of number 4, 5 and 6 rolled into one, did I carry anything that I didn't need? Not really. I ditched a couple of things along the way, gaiters, a couple of things like that, because it was clear I didn't need them. I took them because I thought I'd need them with some new shoes. But I'm kind of at the point now where anything that's in my pack is there because I'm going to use it. So, you know, try to do that. So packing is always there's always a bit of angst there, you know. And for the ladies, you know, it's, what am I going to wear in the evening? You're going to wear your walking stuff. You know, I can speak with some authority on this because I've walked with 2 Caminos with Pat, an 800 and a 200k, and she got very comfortable with the fact that she had her walking gear that she was walking in, and in the evening, you know, we'd clean up and she'd put on her walking gear for the next day, and that was her evening wear. You know, you don't need to be taking extra stuff. I know some ladies like to take, you know, an item, a sarong or something like that, just something different to wear in the evenings, but you don't need lots and lots of clothing. So the packing doesn't need to be a concern. The route, that's probably something you need to seriously think about. And you need to think about how far you're capable of walking, what your time frame is, what sort of Camino that you want. And some are harder than others. So I'm coming back to the title of this. You know, do you want to make it hard or easy? If you want to have an easy first Camino, pick a very popular route. Because the reason being, there's lots of infrastructure. So that's why the Camino Frances is a very popular first Camino, because so many people walk it. I think, you know, 300,000 a year or something. You've got all the facilities, all the accommodation, the cafes and things along the way to support you. What does that mean? It means it's a lot easier. You know, you've got luggage transport services if you want them. You don't have to walk huge distances between accommodation, and the whole thing is just a little bit easier. The last one I walked was the Via de la Plata, which is getting towards the other end of the scale, where the facilities are very sparse. Some days it might be 25, 30 k's between villages, let alone between accommodation options, with nothing in between, no cafes, nowhere to have lunch. So you've got to carry everything. So that's what I mean in terms of, if it's your first Camino and you want to make it easy, pick an easier route. In terms of facilities and infrastructure and so on. It gives you more options, because you might be sort of starting out thinking, oh, we'll walk 20 k's a day, and then you find, oh, actually 15 is more comfortable. You could do that on the Francis, the Portuguese, the English, some of those more popular routes. You couldn't on some of the more remote ones. And you've also got the added logistics issues of having to carry lots more food and water for the day. You don't have those issues on the more popular Caminos. So think very carefully about the route or the route. I think in the checklist down below, there's also a planning video which helps you determine how far you're going to walk. But in a nutshell, let me give you the quick thumbnail sketch of how that works. If you want to finish in Santiago and get your Compostela, your certificate, and let's say you're going to walk, you have 10 days of walking available, and you think you can comfortably walk 20 k's a day, well, guess what your start point could be? It could be 200 k's. 20 k's a day, 10 days, 200 k's back from Santiago on whichever route you're looking at. That's kind of how I work out my start points, although mostly I try to walk a sort of fairly complete Camino. So last year I walked the complete Via de la Plata, the complete Invierno, the complete Finisterre. But if you're walking for the first time, just for a shorter period, 10 days, 2 weeks or whatever, which is great. It's an ideal time to try out the Camino for a couple of weeks. That's how you can work out where to start from. If you want to finish in Santiago, how far can we walk in 2 weeks, 10 days? Start from there. The next question you might have then is, or worry, is how do we get there? Oh, we see all sorts of questions online about, how do I get there from the US, from Australia, and what's the best place to fly into? Obviously, if you live in Europe, it's easy. You get on a bus or a train and you just travel to your start point. For those traveling from a much further distance away, I suppose it does have an influence on the route. Oh, excuse me, I have an itchy moustache today. So for me, coming from Australia, it's fairly easy for me to get flights into Madrid and Paris. And so Paris is, I find, a good entry point for the Camino Francis if I'm starting at Saint-Jean. Madrid is a pretty good start point for most of the Spanish Caminos. So the route will determine to a certain extent sort of how you're going to get there. They're not particularly hard to get to. I mean, just to give you an illustration, to get to Paris from Australia, I fly from Sydney to Paris. I then stay in Paris for a night and have a look around. I get on a fast train down to Bayonne, slow train to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. There we go. If I'm going, so for my last Camino, I had to start in Seville. I got the flight from Sydney to Madrid. I went from Madrid to Seville on a beautiful train journey of about 2.5 hours. Then I was in Seville, ready to start. So, it's generally going to be a flight and a train or something for most start points. And the next thing was, so that's how to get there. And distance, we've kind of talked about that. I'm just looking at my checklist here. Don't be overly optimistic on distance, not for your first Camino. Even if you're relatively fit and you say, oh, we walk the dog every day and, we go hiking, bushwalking, whatever. Walking for hours and hours a day, day on day, is a little bit different. For example, maybe at the weekend you go and do a 5-mile hike most weekends. That's a little bit different to doing like 5 to 10 miles every day, day after day. And what tends to happen is you get sort of niggling injuries and things like that. So what I would say, unless you're a very experienced hiker, do work out what you think is going to be a comfortable distance for you, and that's going to be based on age and fitness and all the rest of it. Even, I was going to say even, I don't want that to sound insulting. My wife, Pat, is a bit of a couch potato. When she comes on Camino, she's pretty comfortable doing 20 Ks. But what I do is I build up slowly. So neither of us really like training. And so when I'm on Camino with Pat, we'll do like 12 Ks on day 1, 15 day 2, 18 day 3, and slowly build up to 20, and then she's pretty comfortable at 20 Ks. And she could do that for weeks. She has done. So you need to sort of understand what's your comfortable distance and don't be overly optimistic. I mean, if you have a little bit of extra time, doesn't matter. Once you get to Santiago, you can take a day trip out to Murcia or Finisterre. There's all sorts of ways to use up that bit of extra time, but I wouldn't want you to be overly optimistic so that you're rushing. You know, you're creating niggling injuries. That can happen if you're trying to push distances that you're struggling a little bit with. You're trying to make up time. That can really impact the enjoyment of the Camino. So better to be a bit conservative, I think, on distance. Okay, so I'll just go through that sort of checklist. Before I do, have a look in the description below the video, and if I can remember, I'll put it in the comments. I'll give you two or a couple of playlists in there, and they're really good videos that a lot of newbie pilgrims have found useful. So they tell me things like, how to plan your Camino, what to pack and all that sort of stuff. In fact, I'm just thinking there's about 6 or 7 videos. Look in the description. That's where I'll put them, because there's quite a list. So let's just run through that checklist then. Pick a sensible route and distance. You're up to your ability. So remember, some routes are easier than others. Lots of infrastructure, lots of options in terms of walking distance. Some are quite hard because of the remoteness and the lack of infrastructure. So if you've got any questions on those, do ask down below. You can use tools like Rome to Rio. If you've never used that, it's a great tool. So how do I get from Sydney to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port? Put it in Rome to Rio, and it'll show you can fly to here and you get a train to there and all the rest of it. What I would say though is don't book through Rome to Rio. Whenever I'm booking travel, be it airlines or trains, I book directly with the operator. Generally, that's going to give you much better service and flexibility. So if you have to change tickets and flights and things, going through an aggregator is always a little bit more complicated, I find. So using tools like that. Start some appropriate exercise. I'm not kind of anti-exercise. I'm a little bit cautious about exercise. It sounds weird, but I injured myself on my first Camino prior to going. So trying to train too hard. So I guess what I'm saying is don't suddenly start doing lots of exercise if you don't normally. Build up very gradually. I mean, if you're super fit and go to the gym every day, not a problem, go for it. But if you're a bit sedentary like me, just build up slowly, and maybe you even plan to build up slowly once you're on your Camino. Trying to train too fast, too hard initially is a good way to be injured before you even go. So be sensible. Pack light. Oh, I've seen some huge packs on pilgrims. Even on my last Camino, oh no, you might be watching this, a guy who became a very dear friend had a pack that must have weighed about 20 kilos. If you're watching it, you know who I'm talking about. Yeah, kind of spare everything in there, and a drone and all sorts of stuff. Pack light. Be kind to your feet. Just pack the bare essentials. And then lastly, if you don't speak a word of Spanish, just learn some basic stuff. Maybe go to a couple of classes, use Duolingo, something like that. Just be aware that that's Mexican Spanish, so there's a few little differences. And have fun with it. Use it. If you haven't travelled overseas much, I have never had an instance where I've tried to speak a local language and people have sort of been offended. They're always pleased and grateful that you try. In fact, I'll finish with a funny story. On my last Camino, walking the Via de la Plata in invierno, not a lot of people speak English on those routes, so I kind of knew I would have to speak Spanish all the time. Don't get the idea that my Spanish is very good. It's bare minimum. And I just got used to asking for things in Spanish. So I'm in Santiago at the end of this, and I wander down from my hotel, and I was thinking in my head, how do I ask this? I wanted to ask the staff, what time are you open for breakfast in the morning? And so I came out with this very rough and ready phrase, which, was sufficient to be understood. And the lady behind the bar just looked at me and said, if you want to practice your Spanish, we can do this. But if you want to communicate quickly, maybe we could just use English. I sort of felt hurt a little bit, and then I thought, no, fair enough. She's probably got people coming in every day trying to practice their Spanish. And, it's like, I'm a bit busy. English might be quicker. But anyway, to get back to the point, learning some basic Spanish is always going to be appreciated. People really do appreciate it. And I certainly found on the remoter routes last year, talking to some of the locals, I just wish I could speak a little bit more because they just wanted to talk, and, I could manage, where are you from and where are you walking to and where did you start and how old are you even, some people were asking. But much beyond that, I struggled, and I don't want to struggle that much. I want to try and learn a bit more. So there we go. Is the Camino hard? No, I don't think it's hard at all. It's as hard as you want it to be. I mean, if you're one of these people who get out there and want to walk 40 k's a day, carrying 12 kilos, yeah, that's hard. I couldn't do it. But if you walk it to the level of your abilities, no, it doesn't have to be hard at all. So there we go. If you're planning your first Camino, do comment down below. I'd love to hear where you're going. And finally, if you enjoy these videos, do hit the thumbs up and do hit subscribe. It really helps the channel. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.